Okay, people, attention, please. On your, I don't know if I have this on your calendar, but I have it on Canvas because we usually do this in class. The Tory versus Loyalist. And I think I have us doing that on Monday. And this Wednesday thing is kind of thrown all of my normal plans in upheaval because this is one of, I think, 4 chapters that I actually do a test review for. We do a test review for for Revolutionary War, A New Nation, and then we do it for progressives, and then we do it for leading up to World War II, because those are 4 really important topics that there are a lot of test questions. Most of you know from AP Euro, I don't do test review, but these topics are really important. So Thursday, we've got a test review, and Monday, I have our Tory versus Loyalist activity that we typically do in class, but we are not going to have time to do it in class. So while I was sitting here yesterday, I thought, oh yeah, we'll do this, because one of the ways that we do a test review is we play an operation, the game Operation, but it's for test review. Anyway, so in one of those things, we have to use Flipgrid, which I'm hoping that a lot of you are familiar with. But what I did, and I'm going to talk to Damon and Finn. Damon and Finn, pay attention to what I'm doing on my screen because you will see the assignment. So on Canvas, if you click the link, please don't, we're not getting that out now, but you can look, and I checked it this morning with Sophie, and it works. So if you click on the link, I'm going to read the assignment to you. This is all laid out in Canvas, so you don't have to write anything down. But this is Loyalist, Tory, or I don't care Flipgrid video assignment. John Adams supposedly broke down the colonists at the eve of the revolution into a third Loyalist, a third Tory, and a third I don't care. You will be assigned the role of either a Loyalist or a Tory, and your job will be to convince those other third to join your side. You will create a video on Flipgrid. You can use any filters, props, songs to create your video. Your video must be at least 2 minutes. If it is not 2 minutes, you will not get full credit, but not longer than 3. You must use facts. So you must say things that are part of the Revolutionary War, like I should hear, bless you, quartering, and writs of communication. I should hear all those words in there. But it must also be persuasive. So being persuasive means I take those facts and kind of put them and ramp them up to support my argument. This is due by Monday the 21st at 3 p.m. And then as a class, we will view these and choose the best video for each category. Okay, so we are going to watch these. So what's different this time is at the bottom, there is this little gray box that says load Loyalist, Tory, or I don't care Flipgrid video into a new window. If you just click that, it will automatically take you to Flipgrid. So you don't need a join code. You don't need to do anything. It will just automatically put you in there. And the first thing it says is record your video. All right. So how many of you have used Flipgrid before? So that you at least know. Okay, awesome. But this time you don't need a join code. You just click it, you move into it, and start recording your video. So next part of this process is who are you going to be? So we are an awesome class of 20. So in here, you are choosing your destiny. And please make sure you recycle or keep your little.
I drive it every day.
I'm just curious, are we supposed to know, like, what either of these groups mean?
No,
We should know that by today.
it's so good.
I should be able to.
Why it's used in the middle.
Is there I don't care one?
No, you're trying to convince me.
You cracked me up. He's not watched the full movie. Just pointing that out. Yeah, I know. How do you watch this? Ew, and I've never seen the second one. You may have seen some movie. I mean, I did just get
You know what it is? I want to be on the second person side.
Yeah, I'm an L. Oh, okay. Thank you. Sorry. No, I don't want to be in Tory. I want to trade here. I want to trade you. Do you work in? So you're against. You're saying why we shouldn't have. I'm saying why we should. Oh, I was like, all right.
Wow, that's nice.
He's like, I'm so scared. I don't understand the character. I'm a well, it says loyalist or toward the other side, loyalist.
All right, Damon. Damon, this is for you. You are an L. Damon. And Finn, this is you. You are also an L. Okay. They were very excited, Damon and Finn, for what you got. All right, so this is the assignment. You have to create a video to persuade the 1/3 I don't care to join your side. So if you are a Tory, that's 10 of you, you need to think about two things. One, where the largest population of Tories are going to be, and why these Tories do not want a revolution. Loyalist, you have to also think about where strong loyalist communities are at, because you have to tell me who you are, right? You have to.
Can I ask a question?
Sure.
Are the loyalists in New England and in the?
You should know that, but yeah.
They are. Okay, I'm making sure. Wait, so
Are you serious?
Loyalist,
In the notes, it said loyalist,
whoever.
in parentheses, Tories.
Do what, sweetie?
In the notes, it said loyalist, and then in parentheses, right next to it, it said Tories.
Oh my gosh, I got this backwards. Everybody that has an L, oh my gosh. Yeah.
I was gonna say,
It makes no sense. I did this. Okay, everybody that's an L, change that to a P. You're a patriot. Okay, I'm editing my assignment at the moment. Oh, Lord have mercy on my soul.
Who are you?
So if you had a L, you are now a patriot. Thank you, Carly. I did this while I was watching a movie.
This is not like you at all.
It is not like me. Thank you for saying that. I appreciate that very much. It is not like me at all. But I was watching a movie. It was very good. Holy moly macaroni. Okay. So it's fixed. So now it should make more sense. All right. So everybody that's a P, everybody that's an L, you are not an L anymore, as Scott said, taking the L, a loser. You are now a patriot, a P. This now makes more sense. Thank you again, Carly. The movie I was watching, so does everybody know what happened here yesterday? Let me just say, does everybody know what happened? We had a gas leak. So like at 1:45, Dr. Jenkins says, I need all in Dr. Jenkins's, she means business voice. We know that voice, right, Gavin? We know that voice. She has a voice that hopefully none of you have experienced that voice because it is a voice. Gavin, it's a voice, right? What? This is being recorded. You cannot say those things. All right. So she has a voice. Ask us all to go to the cafeteria immediately. I'm like, oh my gosh, we won a prize. That's what I always think. We got a prize. Publishers Clearinghouse is down there. It was not a prize. Mr. Stuckey was down there. At that point, he said we have a potential gas leak. And then I'm just going to say, even though this is being recorded, like lots of people had questions. I have no questions. I'm ready to go. I'm standing up, ready to get out. Like a gas leak, I'm leaving. Me and Mr. Wallace both try to get through the same spot. He's like, single file, Norris. I'm like, no, every person for themselves. Adios. I'm out. I'm probably seriously the first or second person out of the parking lot. People want to ask, like, what are we supposed to do with our kids? Where are we supposed to go pick your kid up and go home? Don't say to anybody that I said that. But like, I don't care what your kid's supposed to come to ride the bus here. I'm going home. I'm out. So then I got home and then I got settled down. And then here's what I started thinking. I got a lot of stuff in my room. Like, what if the building blows up and I lose all my stuff, and who's going to pay for my stuff? And I got books that I really like. So I'm doing that while I'm watching an old movie called Westward Women. It's about 1851. And there are these men out in California getting gold. They don't have women. So they send these guys to go to Chicago and pick up 150 women. They travel across.
Is it true?
There were some things like that. It's somewhat true, so, and then when they get to the little town, like a lady loses her son, they're practicing shooting. They're teaching the women how to shoot, and a woman accidentally shoots her son and she has to leave him buried. So Scott, it's an old movie. I think it's like first of all, it was in black and white. Second of all, it didn't fill up my whole TV screen. It's one of those ones that's this big, but it was good. So that is why, thank you for saying that wasn't like me. I got that all messed up. So, all right. So if you weren't able to look at the lecture yesterday, a couple people said they couldn't open it. I don't know if everybody could open it. If you couldn't, it works now. You need to go back and make sure that you look at that because it is important. I try to have those on by 9 o'clock. So sometimes when I put them on, it takes YouTube a while to do that. So maybe if you looked at them before 9, they weren't ready. But anyway. And one more other thing that got me all riled up as part of this whole thing. I should have told my ACT class this morning. We are having a lockdown drill this afternoon. I'm not sure if your ACT teachers told you. It is a for real lockdown. So wherever you're at, 5th hour, it is lock the door, cover the shade, and move. Not that it's you guys in my room, but whoever you have 5th hour. All right. So we are now ready to look at some of the reasons that you should be able to use and think about in this Patriot and Tory debate on which side those 1/3 people should represent. And again, I'm just going to throw a couple things. If you're a Tory, you're thinking about committing treason. Like all these people are committing treason. And obviously there is a bad death factor as a part of that. But if you're a patriot, you got lots of reasons. So my people that are Tories have a little bit of a more difficult approach ahead of them. But what you also need to think about as a Tory is who's being affected. And that, again, will be where you want to think about where you live if you're a Tory. Because if in certain places, in almost all of the 13 colonies, no one is being affected. There's only about 3 colonies that are being affected. So think about that as you look at the Tory side of this bargain. I got this assignment from when I was in high school taking U.S. history, and I was being taught U.S. history with British people, and they were all about this. We had this huge debate, and I usually like to try to do it as a debate in class because it is pretty fun, but we just don't have time, and I'm wasting more time at the moment. So we are on page 5. So those of you that did not get to listen to the lecture, you're missing about a page and a half. So make sure you listen to that again. And most of that page and a half was reinforcing mercantilism, salutary neglect, Proclamation of 1763. Okay? So on page 5, 3 great crises in the colonist that are going to lead to the American Revolution. And I also, again, want to make sure that you know the College Board is not ever really going to ask you a lot of complicated questions about these acts, nor their dates. But these 3 you really do need to have some information about. Not dates or anything, but you do need to know Stamp Act, Townsend Act, and Tea Act. Those are the ones that really are what lead to this crisis. So the first one is the Stamp Act. And again, as it says in your note, perhaps the single most important event leading to the American Revolution, which is why you need to know this. We are going to pursue revolution in 2 distinct paths. We are going to pursue revolution legislatively. We're going to respond to, bless you, we're going to respond to all of these acts legislatively. We're going to write things down. We're going to send petitions. We're going to seek representation. So we're going to take that path. And at the same time, we're going to take this other path with the Sons of Liberty, which is invoking violence, terrorism, destruction of property. That will be the second path. One of those paths by themselves probably would not have been as successful. Both of those things happening at the same time is what leads us to this event called the Revolutionary War. The purpose of the Stamp Act is to raise revenue to support new military force in the colonies. So there's 2 things happening. One, to raise revenue. And again, taxes are a necessity in any kind of nation. Governments have to get money to provide certain things. And most people are okay with paying those taxes if they understand what they're getting in return. What the colonists were getting in return that they felt was a military presence in their colonies that they didn't necessarily want. And this is going to be something that reverberates, this military presence, these redcoats in the colonies. It is going to reverberate for about 100 years. We don't create a strong military. We don't even create a strong police force because what happens during this time period with this presence of redcoats in cities like New York and Boston creates such a mental image of oppression that we don't want to do it again. And it kicks us in the butt time and time and time again, because every time there's a need for a military force, we don't really have one. And we don't really keep one. We don't even really keep one after World War I either, when you would think, okay, we probably should keep a military. Nope, we don't. We reduce. It's not until after World War II that we decide, hey, it's probably a good idea that we have a strong military always. And part of it goes back to this idea of the Stamp Act with this new military force. So what are the provisions? First, this has nothing to do with postage stamps. I promise you that will be an option and a choice should you have a question about this. We don't have postage stamps. The stamp is a seal. So the official stamp on paper. So if those of you that have ever seen anything notarized that has that embossed seal, think about that. So if you needed a birth certificate, a marriage certificate, if you needed newspapers, all of that paper had to have a seal on it to show that it had paid the tax. So if you got paper without the seal, it was illegal. And this is on anything that is paper. Legal documents, pamphlets, newspapers, diplomas, bill of lading. Bills of lading are really important because that's what's necessary for doing business. That's what people trade when I deliver something when a semi truck pulls up and dumps stuff off at our Walmart, they exchange a bill of lading. Here's what's in this truck. Thank you very much. I check off, yep, that's what's in the truck. Without bills of lading, the potential for corruption is large, and business really ceases to be able to operate without these bills of lading. So they were forced to pay that tax. Marriage certificates, you couldn't get married without the seal on your marriage certificate. Death certificate, mortgages, insurance, liquor license, playing cards. There was no real way to get around this tax. We have lots of different taxes in countries, and one of the ways that states generate revenue is what's called a sin tax. And sin taxes tax things like alcohol, cigarettes, etc. So cigarettes get taxed on a regular basis. When the state of Indiana needs to generate income, the first thing they want to do is raise taxes on cigarettes or alcohol. And I don't participate in either one of those things, so go right ahead and raise the taxes as high as you want. I don't care. Just to give you a reference and just to tell you how much times have changed, because my dad was a smoker. I used to could go in the store when I was 10 and buy a pack of cigarettes for my dad. And in 1976, they were 55 cents a pack. Yeah, just to show you, nothing's really increased for cigarettes except taxes. And that tax is tremendous. Every time I go in there and see like a pack of cigarettes is $5. Like, that's insanity. But that's one of the ways that people can generate revenue without raising taxes on normal people. When you pay your car registration, there is an excise tax based on the type of vehicle you drive. It's sometimes called a wheel tax. So if you've got a big vehicle, you use the road harder, you pay a bigger tax. Most people don't have a problem with that. But when you tax everyday items that people need to do business, to get married, that's another thing. Often another one is, and the state of Indiana taxes food, but most states don't put a tax on food because food is something you have to have. You need that. And so other than the state of Indiana putting a tax on food, kind of the same way as the state of Indiana makes you pay for textbooks and nobody else does. So much for your free public education. So that's a problem. They also, again, the Stamp Act tries offenders in admiralty courts where juries are not allowed, and the burden of proof is on the defendant. Again, you are assumed that you're guilty. And again, tells us why our justice system and our Constitution was so important in saying the opposite, right? They have to prove that you're guilty, because once someone says you're guilty of something, it's really hard to prove you're innocent. It's much more difficult to prove someone guilty than it is for you to prove your own innocence. Prime Minister Grenfell's review on the Stamp Act was it was reasonable and just, only required the colonials to pay for their fair share, and the Stamp Act had been in Britain and much heavier for about 50 years. Now, what the loyalists are going to say, I'm going to do this now. What the patriots will say about C3C is, yeah, that's fine. But the British were allowed to vote. They were allowed to have representation in Parliament. So you can't use that as a valid argument because they consented to the Stamp Act for 50 years. We can't consent because we don't have representation. So our first legislative response to this, and I would put a big giant box around the Virginia resolves, because this is really our first real attempt at legislation that we get, and we're good at it as a result of salutary neglect. The Virginia resolves are led by this guy named Patrick Henry. Give me liberty or give me death, Patrick Henry. And the Virginia leaders believe that the Stamp Act attacked the colonials' rights as an Englishman. And that's what this says. Again, the idea being we are miles and miles and miles away from revolution at this point. We are attacking this as Englishmen, and we are attacking it as, and I would make sure this is an important part, enlightened Englishmen, right? We understand this life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness or property that John Locke says. So 5 of Henry's 7 resolves will be adopted by the House of Burgess, including non-importation. We'll talk about that. And claimed that Virginia could only be taxed by Virginians because we don't have representation. And thus we begin this no taxation without representation. Assemblies of 8 other colonies are going to pass similar resolves to Virginia. And so this is moving through the colonies very rapidly and very quickly. The colonists' views distinguished between legislation and taxation. So we are represented by Parliament for legislation. The right of Parliament regarding custom duties, taxation, and internal taxes were the exclusive right of the official local government. If you're taxing us here, then that's our local government. What Grenville said was you have virtual representation in Parliament, that all British subjects are represented, even those that do not vote for members in Parliament. So here's how that works. You guys are virtually represented by representatives in the state of Indiana. And at the same time that you're virtually represented, we have the most control over what you can and can't do. We can change in a whim driving laws. So just as so you can see the wide spectrum, when my daughter turned 16, she could get her license the next day. Got her license the next day, she was driving the next day. The requirement was you couldn't get it on your birthday because somehow they thought you'd be crazy wild getting it on your birthday, but you get it the next day. And when that law was in effect, this high school parking lot was jam-packed. Every spot in that paved lot, and we called it the gravel lot, and every spot in the gravel lot was full. My daughter she didn't get hers. We had some freshmen that could drive to school because of that 16. I think her parking pass was like 154. I mean, I don't know that we even get close to 154 people parking because of the late. So then when my next daughter got hers, she had to wait the 180 days, and there was no laws like you couldn't drive with people. Like now, you guys aren't supposed to drive with people in your car. There was no laws like that. 0 laws, none. It's why we can create dress codes. It's why we can censor things that you do in high school. It's why we can do so many things, because you really don't have representation. You don't have anybody representing you. You're virtually represented. And it should feel like virtual representation because you really don't have any. So let's finish this out on the top of page 6. Colonists will dismiss virtual representation. And the key is they don't really want representation in Parliament. They just want some kind of say in the taxes. So we're going to end with the Stamp Act Congress. So this is the legislative thing that we do. And these are really nice terms that they use because we know exactly what this is. Stamp Act Congress brings together 27 delegates, from 9 colonies. Anybody want to guess 2 colonies that don't show up? Rhode Island and North Carolina. Remember, I told you, anytime everybody does something but 2 colonies don't, Rhode Island and North Carolina. Massachusetts invited all the colonies up there to Massachusetts. They drew up a single statement of their rights and grievances and demanded that the king and parliament rescind the Stamp Act. This is legislation. This is enlightened principles. If your government is not representing you, you have the right and the responsibility to respond. So what are we going to do? We're going to write everything down. Largely ignored by England. And the reason it's ignored by England is it puts Parliament and the king in a very difficult place. If they recognize the Stamp Act Congress and anything that comes out of that, then they have to recognize the right for the colonists to participate legislatively. Does that make sense? So if I just ignore you and pretend you don't exist, then that solves the problem. It's called denial. I'm not going to notice you, because if I notice you, it brings legitimacy to the Stamp Act Congress. And I, as the king and parliament, am not going to recognize your right to exist as a Congress. The Stamp Act Congress is significant because it brings together representation from different and rival colonies and set a precedent for future resistance to the rule. Okay, so when we go back to the Stamp Act leading cause of the revolution, the reason being is the Stamp Act Congress. You have to make that cause and effect. It's not because colonists were so mad about tax on their paper. It's because colonists formed a legislative response as the Stamp Act Congress. This is what starts to bring everybody together and a common cause. Help break down sectional suspicions within the colonies. And so then 6E, another one of the, actually I should say we have a three-pronged path. We have the political path, meaning we're legislating. We have our violence and terroristic activities. And then we have an economic path. The economic path is not going to be as successful because we can't really hurt that powerhouse. But on 6E, non-importation agreements against British goods, England economy suffers from non-importation, but non-importation was not derisive. And that means we're going to boycott. So E says, we are now going to boycott British goods. And boycotts have to be, it has to hurt for it to be effective. So at this point, I tell my boycott story that goes and starts 9/11, when at that time the country mark, and it's not the same people, was Kearns. I don't know if any of you remember that. And on that day, 9/11, Kearns gas was like $1.25 a gallon. And when I went to go pick my kids up, because my husband's in Chicago, he can't get home. He's telling me, you need to make sure you have cash. You need to make sure you have gas in the car. We don't still know what's happening. I know it doesn't seem as scary, but we knew nothing about what was happening. At that time, I had an Expedition, and I always bought my gas from Kearns just because it was convenient. And the gas line at the Casey's was all the way to the Walmart at this. It used to be the Speedway, or what was that used to be? The 500 Express. That was all the way almost down to the railroad tracks past the Diamond for people trying to get gas. So I get in Kearns, and the little man's standing there, and I look up, and the gas is like $5.25 a gallon. And I'm like, oh my gosh. He goes, yeah, it's bad. I'm like, okay, I need fill my tank up. He's standing there pumping the gas. He fills my tank up. It cost me like almost $100 to get my gas tank filled. The next day, when things calm down, I drive back by Kearns, and it's $1.25 again. I'm like, oh snap, he didn't. I go in, I'm like, dude, you just charged me $5. That's illegal. You can't do that. You're not allowed to do that. He said, well, I was afraid I wasn't going to get any more gas. And I'm like, I legitimately understand that, but you gave me 30 gallons. If you were afraid you weren't going to give me any gas, you should have said, I'm rationing this out. I can only give you 5 gallons. And I wouldn't be standing here today, but you gave me 30 gallons. You ripped me off. I want my money back. He did give it to me that day, but I went in there about twice a day, every day, and finally got my money back. And then they got prosecuted by the state of Indiana for gas gouging. Hence, I never shopped at Kearns again. I like to think I was part of the reason why they went bankrupt, but I'm pretty sure me not shopping at Kearns didn't do anything. My mom, oh, you're going to get to hear lots about my mom. My mom, when I was when we lived in California, Cesar Chavez, who was a great promoter of migrant workers, asked people to boycott table grapes. So my mom decided we were boycotting table grapes. I don't know why. What? Table grapes? Because that's what migrant workers picked. And migrant workers weren't paid well. And so Cesar Chavez was trying to organize and unionize them. So my mom decided we were going to boycott table grapes. I could not have table grapes. You do not know how bad you want a table grapes until you can't have them. I was trading my Twinkies and my ding dongs for grapes. And my mom would say every day after school, did you have a grape today? I didn't. My Twinkie was awesome. I'm sure my mom's protest did nothing, but she felt good about it. All right, let me stop this recording.